Hey everyone, I'm back again. I'm going to make this video as a full build guide to the Blood Magic, Soulwrest, Necromancer. And due to popular request, as a lot of people have asked me to start out with a map, so I will just run this shaped volcano here, nothing too crazy, but hopefully it'll get you an idea of how this build looks. I'm not really a big video editor, so I apologize. There won't be any cuts in this video. I'm just going to take it all in one take here. So I'll show you guys how this build works. The entire build revolves around the Soulwrest staff, and essentially we are summoning these phantasms, and they function as the essentially primary form of our damage. We don't really have any other means of damage for this build. The goal for this build as you map is to pretty much continue to consume corpses. As you consume corpses, you'll gain certain buffs from certain items, and it'll ensure that your minions, you keep all 20 to 21 minions up of the phantasms at all times. And the build works very well. It's definitely hardcore viable. I am playing in hardcore betrayal right now. This version using blood magic is also extremely tanky. As you could tell, I am at nearly 10,000 life. And I'm only level 93, so 10,000 life is definitely possible with this build. It's extremely safe. The single target is pretty good, depending on the circumstances and how good your character is geared. There are some weaknesses to this build, depending on which fight you're doing. The main weaknesses this build has is that fighting against multiple targets is sometimes a bit of a nuisance, because the phantasms won't focus fire a certain mob, so that can get annoying. One specific instance as an example is the Aziri split phase. That can get a little annoying, so if you were to try something like hard or Uber Aziri, it would be pretty challenging on this build, just due to the fact that there are multiple targets. The other big weakness to this build is the phantasms do have health and they can die. So I found that when they die, you obviously have to resummon them, and that will cause you to lose a lot of your damage. However, for the most part, the build functions really well. So far, I have done up to tier 15 maps. I have done a yellow elder, and I have done regular Ziri, all with fairly little challenge. It was all done with ease, essentially. I didn't really come across any issues. The build itself has had very few close calls, and yeah, it's just all around a great, strong build, and only really needs one item to get it started. So I will kind of go over gearing first, especially as you're starting to level. In terms of a league starter, you can do this build as a league starter, but bear in mind the whole build does revolve around this staff, and the staff can get pretty expensive. I think right now in hardcore betrayal, the staff is going for like 180 chaos, so it's a little over like 2 exalts. I think it's somewhere around 2 to 3 exalts. So it's a bit hard to initially get, but once you do get it, you're pretty much set. You don't really need any other gear besides the staff. All the rest of your gear can be rare. This is the tree. Essentially, when you're starting to level, you can go through spell damage. The way I leveled is I initially started with Blade Vortex up until level 28. At level 28, I switched to Winter Orb, and then you go Winter Orb all the way to level 62. At 62 is when you can use the staff, and at that point, once you get the staff, you are pretty much going to be sailing. So your initial goals when you start leveling, you can go through the spell damage. If you don't want to refund the points, you can just go straight through the intelligence like I did here. I'd say get Arcanist Dominion, Heart and Soul, Lord of the Dead, and you really want to go straight for Righteous Armory and then go to Spiritual Aid. The reason why you want to get Spiritual Aid is because you want to convert that minion damage to damage for your Winter Orb, because that'll really help boost the damage, because in the end this is a minion build and it's not a spell damage, I guess, build. So you want to get that Spiritual Aid just to get some of this minion damage to help you. Once you get Spiritual Aid, you can just kind of pick and choose where you want to go. You can come down here, get Discipline and Training. You can come all the way down here to get minion damage. Until end game, when you get stuff like Might of the Meek, you can take Grave Pact too. You can use zombies, things like that. That's perfectly fine. I continued to level using Winter Orb, zombies, and yeah, I think that was about it. And that took me all the way to level 62. It was relatively easy. And for Bandits, you just want to do +2 skill points. You're obviously not crit, so there's no reason to go Leer, and you generally never want to take the other two Bandits, so +2 skill points. For the Soulwrest, you only need a 6-socket, you don't need to link it. As I mentioned in my previous videos, if you guys watch them, you don't, it kind of works like Whispering Ice or like Nigamahu's Flame, so you don't need to actually link it. For the links, you want Summon Phantasm on kill, GMP, Controlled Destruction, Faster Projectiles, Minion Damage, and Brutality, or instead of Brutality, you can do Added Fire. It depends on which way you want to build it. So if you go Brutality, you will be a pure physical build. The reason I say that is because it's important to note, since there is a lot of jewels in this build, and jewels are where you do get a bulk of your damage from. So a lot of the damage is going to come from these Ghastly Eye Jewels, and your main focus for the Ghastly Eye Jewels is you want to get high life and a high physical roll if you are using Brutality in terms of the physical. So all my jewels here have some form of life and physical damage, and this actually adds up a lot, and it makes a pretty big deal, especially late game. If you decide to get Added Fire, then you can go physical / elemental. So you can then get not only physical rolls, but you can also do elemental damage rolls as well, and those would work too. Since I'm Brutality, deal no elemental, no chaos, so I'm only getting physical damage rolls on my jewels. I would say in terms of going Blood Magic, I think I went Blood Magic at around level like 85 to 80 to 85. You go Blood Magic pretty late just because it's literally on the opposite side of the tree, so it takes a while to get there. But once you do, just make sure to get Mortal Conviction straight after. Pick up Unwavering Stance too, because it's a great form of defense to not be stunned. This build doesn't run a lot of evasion, so really no point in not sacrificing cannot evade attacks. So definitely pick up Unwavering Stance. And pretty much you're just going life and jewels for the rest of the build. Once you get to pretty late game, you can start doing other things like picking up 2 Might of the Meeks here. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of you guys are aware of the crazy power these 2 jewels give. So it turns your Constitution wheel from like, I think it's like 45% life to like 70% life. So it's pretty crazy, especially these 3 nodes turn into 10% life nodes, so it's just nuts. So definitely once you get more endgame, you can try going for 2 Might of the Meeks. For the Ascendancy, Spectres, Skeletons, and Zombies, you don't really use as a primary form of damage, so you don't really need to pick up any of them. Believe it or not, it's pretty uncommon for a Necromancer, but we don't need any of these, so essentially you just want to get all the other nodes. So Puppet Master, Mistress of Sacrifice, Invoker, and Commander of Darkness. Aside from having a very big life pool, this build's other main form of defense is block and spell block. So we go through here and we get the staff block and whirling barrier. The Soulwrest, the Azamite staff base, has an 18% block attack damage implicit, so that's really nice. Not as nice as a shield, but still quite nice. We also take advantage of Rumi's Concoction, and we also use Bone Offering. And with our nice little Ascendancy here, offerings have 50%. Your offerings affect you, but it's 50% reduced effect. However, that still leads to roughly 17% attack block and 17% spell block. So definitely quite nice. In the end, once you have all your block up, you're actually at about 65 block and 56 spell block. I also run Stone of Lazwar. If you're kind of short on life or resists, you don't necessarily need this, but it's also a nice little endgame amulet because, and it's not too expensive, you can get an additional 20% spell block just through this amulet here, so really nice in that sense. So pretty much a high life pool, block, and the fact that we're a Necromancer, we stay back all the time, our minions, we try to stay ahead of our minions, or stay behind our minions, is what makes this build quite strong, defensively quite powerful. I'm currently level 93 now in Hardcore Betrayal. I've only had like one close call, and that was from a detonate dead kind of thing. So I've never really actually had to use my logout macro and had a really close call, just because of how high my life pool is. Comb's Heart is also an endgame item. You don't need Comb's Heart, so if I literally just take my Comb's Heart off, I'm still at 7.5k life, which is still quite nice. Obviously, you could just run some kind of, you can run Tabula, you can put like a 6-link zombie in it, that's what I did earlier. You can also just use like some kind of Astral Plate or something like that, just for some defense. But the Combs is quite nice because it does give you quite a heap of life, little over 2k, especially with all the life nodes you'll be running. Rings can just be rare rings. At some point, once you can drop some resists, I would recommend getting an Essence Worm with haste. The reason why I recommend this is so we can actually take advantage of Commander of the Darkness, which will give us 20% all res, it'll give 30% damage to allies and ourselves. I guess it's not really super useful, but I think this does affect minions. I think so. And then you get that 3% attack cast speed, which is also not too bad. But mainly you're doing it for the res. This build is quite short on res, especially once you're doing things like running Stone of Lazwar, Bubonic Trail, the Staff, of course, and Comb's Heart. Kind of leaves a little room for resists. So it's definitely a good little bonus there if you can get it. Gloves, just rare gloves. Helmet is also just a rare, I'd say, bone helmet. You can even go a step further and try to get like an Elder helmet with like minion damage, something like that, and you could even like run I don't know, like a summon skeletons or something in it if just want to get that extra little boost of damage, but it's not really necessary. Belt is just a Stygian Vise. Again, this build is really big on the Ghastly Eye Jewels, so I'd say definitely run a Stygian Vise. And for Bubonic Trails, I definitely also recommend these boots because they trigger the Death Walk. The Death Walk triggers the Corpse Explosions, and the Corpse Explosions will trigger the Consumed Corpse, and you will pretty much always have 5% life regen uptime. I'll just hop back in here really quick, and you can see that my life regen, once I consume a corpse, is actually 1,000. So that is quite high. So that's why I definitely recommend getting Bubonic Trails, just to try to keep up that recently consumed a corpse as much as you can. For Flasks, you generally, I'd say, just get a Seething of Staunching. I'm using a Quartz, a Basalt, definitely want the Rumies, a high roll preferably, and of course the Alchemists of Adrenal and Quicksilver, pretty standard stuff there, just basically defensive flasks. So again, if you don't necessarily need a Lazwar, you don't need Comb's Heart, you don't necessarily need Bubonic Trail, a 2-socket, but you can definitely roll with a 1-socket, that's fine. I'll go over the rest of my links now. So essentially, I'm using Desecrate. As I'm running in maps, I'm Desecrating, and then I'm immediately casting Bone Offering. I have Bone Offering on my right click. That's probably the main spell you're going to be using. Convocations just on my spacebar. You generally want to use this fairly often because what I found is your Phantasms do kind of fall behind sometimes. So you definitely do kind of want to use that when you can. We'd run Animate Guardian and Raise Spectre. The purpose of Animate Guardian and Raise Spectre is both of them aren't there for damage, but they do give certain bonuses. So with the Animate Guardian, of course, I'm running the Dying Breath, Victario's Flight, and Leer cast that gives me and all the Phantasms bonus damage. So I'd say for 1 socket, it's definitely a good thing to have. You also get 10% more movement speed. So definitely get that Animate Guardian. It's 100% worth 1 socket. It is this build, now that I'm 2-socket Bubonic Trails, I'm a little, and Comb's Heart, I'm a little starved on sockets, but it's definitely worth running this. You also absolutely want to use a Raise Spectre, and you want to get the Carnage Chieftain, I believe that's the name, from Act 2 here. The reason why you want to get a Carnage Chieftain from Act 2 is because a Carnage Chieftain, where is it? Right there. It'll give the bonus of, it casts a spell that grants Frenzy Charges. So it'll give Frenzy Charges to all your Phantasms, and it's like huge boost in damage. So you absolutely do want to get, for that 1 Spectre that you have, get a Carnage Chieftain from Act 2. Obviously resummon it in a high level, so it'll be higher life. But you absolutely want that Carnage Chieftain. Bone Offering here. I'm also using Phase Run and just to help running through packs. Sometimes what I'll do is if there's a pack here, I'll quickly cast Phase Run, and then I'll run in and cast Convocation, and then all my Spectres will, or all my Phantasms will essentially summon in the middle of the pack, and they'll immediately wipe everything out. So that's also kind of a good little strategy I use. We're using Blood Magic because I've found, or from what I've heard, the Carnage Chieftain will sometimes run out of mana, I guess. So you run Blood Magic just so it can continually cast that War Cry or whatever it has to grant the Frenzy Charges. In the Bubonic Trail, you want Projectile Weakness Curse on hit. This is really the way you're gonna apply the curse. So say if Einhar was the boss here, what I would do is I would cast Desecrate, and then I'd kind of just run a little circle around the boss that would explode the corpses, and that actually triggers the curse on hit, projectile weakness from the Death Walk. So the boss would get projectile weakness, and at that point, it'll just die pretty quickly. Let's see. This build is pretty dex starved, so I'd say where you can, try to get dexterity. At this point, I've kind of min-maxed all my gear. So I have dexterity, 50 dex on my ring, I have about 40 dex on my gloves, and I crafted dex on my helmet. If you don't kind of have the luxury of doing that or aren't there yet, what you can do is, I'm running an anatomical knowledge here, but instead of this, you can use a careful planning, and this will pretty much get you that dex requirement that you're missing. As you can see now, 219 dex. So you can run a careful planning here that'll solve all your dex problems essentially. But if you have enough dex from elsewhere, you can just use this as another gassy eye jewel. I run anatomical knowledge just because there's a lot of intelligence in this area. I say other than that, you don't really need anything else for the build. So again, you can use all rares. Flame Dash is going to be our main mode of, I guess, movement skill. Desecrate, Convocation, Animate Guardian here. We got the Curse on Hit Proj weakness there. and respective burn from phase 1 blood magic there. So those are all the whatchamacallit, skill gems. Try to also late game get a level 21 summon phantasm on kill, because this will let you have up to 21 phantasms instead of just 20. So that's also something to note. So I will put all this in my, I'll put a POB link in the description. I'll also put my profile link as well, so you guys can just take a look at that. And I'd say that's pretty much the build. So I hope you guys kind of enjoy that. I hope some of you guys will try out Soulwrest. It's honestly a really, really solid staff. It'll practically carry you through all of endgame just with one item, so it's quite amazing. I'm going to continue playing this character and hopefully try to maybe push like level 95. That's kind of my goal here, maybe 96. I don't know if I'll get really any higher than that. But yeah, hope you guys enjoy the video. Hope you guys found it useful. I've never really made a fully fledged build guide like this before, so I hope I kind of covered all the bases. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I will try to answer them in the comments below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys in another video.